Hello and welcome to this Tuesday edition of FreightWaves Now. I'm your host Anthony Smith, and today we have Michael Vincent back with us. He's going to give us a shipper update, but first we're going to go to Zach Strickland himself with a carrier update brought to you by PowerFleet. Stay tuned.
Everyone, and welcome to your Tuesday carrier update presented by PowerFleet. I'm Zach Strickland. So, looking at our tender rejections for the United States right now, we've got a 24.51% tender rejection rate. Now you can see clearly that we are on that downhill slide after the holidays. Just how far we'll go is a big question over what's going to happen here over the next 30 days or so. January, typically a very slow month for freight. We come out of the holidays. It takes a little bit of time for the capacity to come back online, but it does tend to continue to slow down until about March or so. But we're not so sure that that's going to happen this year because of the fact that we have been on a horizontal trend line with the tender rejection rate. If you look at our little dotted line right here, we're just now getting to that point where we're starting to see that bottom edge of the tender rejection rates. Since about September, Labor Day, we have bounced above 24%, from about 24 to 28.3% through the course of the last quarter or so. And it does look like it may have a little bit of momentum to push us back down through that 24% mark, which if it does, that'll be a big signal point for the market softening a little bit more than it has been over the last several months. We've been in a very strong holding pattern here with our tender rejection rates and capacity. Looking at our volumes, outbound tender volumes. So our tender volumes still extraordinarily high for what this index typically measures, 10,800, normally a number or a value that we have seen in the summer, and we are down in the trough of tender volumes right now. Now again, it includes all tenders, so that's going to include that 24% tender. So it's still about 14% higher on the accepted tender volumes than it was this time last year. So we're still seeing extraordinary volumes coming out of the freight market right now. It is stabilizing somewhat. If you can see, we're not seeing as much erratic movement. Volatility isn't as strong. We're just kind of going to that holding pattern before we start to really, I think here in the next couple of weeks, we'll have a big sign over whether or not this market is going to continue its torrid pace or start to stabilize a little bit further. So breaking it down, our weighted rejection index, no big shocks here. This is our tender rejection rates for each market combined with their market share value. So it weights each market with higher volume more so than the smaller market. So Bismarck, North Dakota, sorry, you don't get a lot of credit for having the small amount of freight that you have moving around there. Atlanta, Georgia, Ontario, California, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, all have a lot stronger weight when their tender rejection rates move. So you can see it and you can point out clearly where the most significant changes to capacity in the United States are right now. And you can see where I got a lot of red right now. It's just coming down out of Christmas, out of the New Year's holiday. Capacity's coming back online, so those tender rejection rates are coming down from the highest levels of the past 12 months at 28.37%. So not a lot of shock here. Mobile, Alabama, showing a little bit of increase in their tender rejection rate at a 2.8, but you can see the negatives have it this week as we've seen a lot more stabilization. Elizabeth, New Jersey, Allentown, Pennsylvania, Ontario, California, shockingly, continues to be, move back towards a lot softer environment than we saw in most of 2020. Looking at our tender market share values, this is what I'm talking about here. These are the biggest markets in the United States: Atlanta, Georgia, Los Angeles, Elizabeth, New Jersey, Dallas. These all carry a lot more freight weight with them. They demand a lot more capacity. So it's important to know these markets are moving because they're going to generate a lot of the disruption in the freight market itself for the capacity changes. Looking at our largest markets in the United States, kind of our freight hubs, if you will, we've got Atlanta, Georgia, Ontario, Harrisburg, and Joliet up there around Chicago. You can see tender rejection rates bouncing all over the place for the most part, but it is interesting to see. If you look at Atlanta, over there in the far corner, it actually ticked up yesterday along with Joliet. So the central part of the country showing a little bit of activity as tender rejection rates actually are coming up. Harrisburg and the, Ontario market, which is going to be the big story of the month, slowing down. So keep an eye on the West Coast coming in January, and that'll do it for today's Carrier Update.
The comprehensive logistics offerings from PowerFleet cover in-cab ELD, fleet management, trailer tracking, cargo monitoring, and tracking other assets such as chassis and intermodal containers. Power up your operations with PowerFleet.
Good Tuesday morning to you. I'm Michael Vincent. This is your shipper update. Let's jump into it. Outbound tender volume index, as we're seeing, we're still stair-stepping out of that trough after the holidays as shippers start to come back online. Now we see this big cliff that we fell down on, and you look at this line across here. Actually, we're still very, very high, and we've been climbing, throughout the entire summer and throughout the fall and into the holidays. We have this drop, but we've only dropped back to where we were in June. Still 10,832 is the index level here that normally we would see this down here in the 7,500. So extremely high volumes still, but we are seeing some stabilization here as you see the outbound tender rejects still dropping as they normally do this time of year. So loose capacity right now, and as shippers take advantage of that right now, because I don't suspect that is going to be the case moving forward as you would see in a normal January. And that's kind of what we're looking at here, is trying to figure out, will January occur like it normally occurs? Usually a very slow month. Rates tend to have a downward pressure. Right now you're showing a little bit of a downward pressure on rates, but it's, we're still looking at almost 25% or 1 in 4 loads being rejected, as volumes are still depressed from where they were just a couple weeks ago. Will those jump back? There's still 20-25 ships at anchor outside Los Angeles, which, the imports drive a huge part of the over-the-road trucking that moves. So we'll see as that comes back online and as shippers continue. Looking at the map of the United States here for outbound tender rejects and outbound tender volumes, rejects in the color and volume in the blue, we can see this is all modes now. We can see volumes still quite elevated out of Los Angeles right now, even though depressed through holidays. As this comes on, we suspect this will start turning a little bit more blue. But even where it is right now, you're looking at a 20% rejection rate at the low end right now after the holidays. When you look up into the Northeast, you can't see it barely here the way the angle I have this, but Erie, Pennsylvania is still up in almost half of the loads being rejected in that, as the massive volume still coming out of Harrisburg and Columbus, and even Pittsburgh getting in the act now, coming back online with outbound shipping, sucking that capacity out of those markets. Atlanta still quite high in volumes. It is it is stabilized. There's not a lot of volatility that is going on right now, but going into a January with these kind of volumes and these kind of stabilized, if you will, outbound tender rejections, it's going to be an interesting January as we move forward, definitely for the shippers to see where rates get pressured up or down. Moving forward, we see the van, as we see the central part of the country and into Pittsburgh and Harrisburg, outbound tender rejection rates or capacity is still quite tight in those areas right there. If we look at the refrigerated, again in the blue is the refrigerated tender rejections, center of the country where you would normally suspect it, but you're seeing it in Indianapolis, again up there in upstate New York near the Erie, Pennsylvania area, western Michigan, and northern Florida, southern Georgia. Very, very tight capacity in those markets for the refrigerated. If we look at our volatility here, I have our largest markets, filtered by our largest markets: Ontario, Harrisburg, Houston, Los Angeles, Dallas, Elizabeth, Allentown. You can see outbound reject volatility are in a mild or moderate decrease, and some strong decreases in outbound tender rejections. Elizabeth, Allentown, Columbus, Ohio. Take advantage of those as shippers, as the rejections are quite low in those areas. That'll do it for your shipper update. I'm Mike Vincent.
And that's going to do it for this Tuesday edition of FreightWaves Now. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. If you want more content, you can find us in all your favorite platforms, including Google Android Marketplace and Apple TV. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.